When we invited the present King Charles III to visit here for September 2001, he arrived not in September but in February, and he was very gracious, but we only had a couple of weeks notice of him coming. The parish council had invited him. We sent a letter to St James's Palace, and strangely in February I got a telephone call saying, could I please ring St James's Palace? So there was a number from Elizabeth Buchanan, could I please ring this lady, who was Prince Charles's private secretary. Well, you don't always get those sort of messages, do you? So anyway, I rang St James's Palace and spoke to Elizabeth Buchanan, and she said, "Oh, would it be convenient?" I always remember her saying this. Would it be convenient if His Royal Highness came in 2 weeks' time? It was in 2 weeks' time. He was visiting Shropshire, and he'd like to come and see Boscobel. He can't come in September, but he can come in February. So I said, and she was actually asking me if it was okay if he came. You see, so I thought, well, yes, I'm sure we can accommodate it. I then started ringing around. I rang English Heritage and said, just had a call that Prince Charles wants to come and visit Boscobel in 2 weeks' time. And the lady at the other end said, oh, he can't do that, we're shut.
But the communication hadn't been with them, it'd been with the parish council.
It'd been with the parish council. Yeah. So I rung back to Elizabeth Buchanan and said, very sort of posh lady, and said, I've just been told by English Heritage that Boscobel House is shut. And there was a sort of silence, I remember, like they do. And she said, leave that with me. and the following Monday, I came up here to see what was going on, and they were out painting the rails.
I bet they were.
But the other interesting thing is, so she came up the following Monday and arranged all the trip, very gracious in her pearls and court shoes and everything. You'll stand here and you'll stand there and this, that and the other. One thing she told us on the trip, on the visit, and he came up and he was very gracious, but she told us that we ought to know that Prince Charles had a very poor opinion of Charles II. He thought he was a bit of a scoundrel, and that when he was crowned, and I can remember this vividly, he was not going to be crowned King Charles III. He was going to be crowned King George the 7th.
He was going to change his name.
He was going to change his name. He wasn't going to be called Prince Charles. And it was only 20 years later, 25 years later, when he was being crowned, this suddenly came to me. He'd obviously, in this period, decided that he'd stick with Charles. Isn't it interesting that at that particular time...
Well, there's a precedent, of course, because his grandfather changed his name.
Yes, he changed his name. Oh, he was quite entitled to it, because I think his second name is George, isn't it, or something. He was quite into... George, it would have been George the 7th, wouldn't it? He was going to be crowned King George the 7th.
Oh, interesting, yeah. What do you remember of his visit? You say he was gracious and pleasant?
Yeah, what I remember about his visit was that he was very well briefed. He knew the story. It was my job to explain to him, because in the meantime, the tree had blown down. When we invited him, there was a nice tree there.
Oh, so the decision to plant a sapling was after the invitation was already accepted?
Yeah. So the tree had blown down. So my job was to explain to him what had happened to the tree.
So he wasn't invited here to actually plant the tree in the first place?
Oh, no. So, and we presented him with a tree. But of course, the day after his visit, we had foot and mouth locked down, and we were never able to take it down to Highgrove. So it's still growing in front of the house at Shackley. We had to plant it there. They were going to move it up here because this isn't an actual royal oak. I grew it myself from an acorn of the royal oak. So that unfortunately sits down in front of that, and that's the tree that we gave him. But he was very interested, and I remember I was walking down the line of the parish councillors, and he said, "So what's the hot topic at your parish council at the moment?" And somebody said, "Your visit, sir." And he said, "Oh, right." But he asked one or two interesting questions, and one thing I shall always remember I'd arranged for him, his nurse who'd looked after him when he was about 4 was living in Albrighton, and I knew her. And her daughter, her eldest daughter, was dying of cancer. And she contacted me when she knew Prince Charles was coming. And she said, do you think there's any chance that I could introduce my daughter to the Prince during his visit? So I wrote to Elizabeth Buchanan and said, would Prince Charles be prepared to meet with Anne and with her daughter? And I got this immediate reply back saying, yes, he remembered her very well. She'd looked after him when he was a little boy of 4, when he had an operation on his foot or something. And he'd be very pleased to meet her daughter. And so we arranged for them to meet in a room somewhere around here. And they had 10 or 15 minutes together. And the daughter and Anne were just overwhelmed by his kindness and his generosity. And he wrote to them afterwards. And the daughter died about 6 months later. But I got a lovely letter from both of them. And I shall always remember that. And as he left, his car was going off. And there was a whole lot of ladies had come probably from a care home somewhere. I don't know from where. There was about 20 of them on sort of Zimmers and wheelchairs. And they were on the far side when he was going out. They were across by the shop. And as he was going out, he stopped. We were all waving him from this side. And he stopped the car and he got out and he went across and just said hello to all of them. And they were just absolutely, and he didn't have to do that. He didn't have to see the lady who was dying, the daughter. But I was impressed with the Prince then. I thought, he was somebody who went, the extra mile, if you know what I mean. And I've always been impressed with him, really, since then.
Because you felt he didn't just turn up and then do the bare minimum and leave.
He got no interest in it. I didn't feel he'd come here with just another job. And I was really impressed with that visit.
Invested in it a little bit, yeah.
Yes, and he'd gone to the
He went upstairs into the attic, didn't he? Because there's photographs of him, yeah.
Yeah, he went up, took him up and showed him the pre-sale. He was quite interested in that. Whether, as a result of that, he decided to become King Charles, I don't know. Who knows?
Maybe Boscobel made all the difference.
Maybe
your conversation.
Maybe we've altered the course of English history again.
Again, exactly.